Hey guys, last month we announced the return of the Top 5s as an exclusive subscriber benefit for our channel over at 4pp.tv, and it's going to work a little bit differently than you may remember. Instead of doing these as a podcast like we used to, we'll be producing these as a video series on our YouTube channel. Each month we'll focus on a different topic, and we'll have different members of the staff produce a video each month. That way you're constantly having new faces, new voices, new opinions shed light on these topics. The topics are all suggested by the members of the community, with the exception of this episode, so be expecting some pretty kooky, crazy, out there ideas, so we're pretty excited to be talking about those in the coming months. But to get things started, we figured we'd keep it simple. We just crossed over the halfway point of 2013, so what better way to kick these off than to talk about our most anticipated games of the fall and winter of 2013. So with that said, let's go ahead and get things started. This is my list. Coming in at number 5 on my list is Assassin's Creed 4. I know it's a bit of a cop-out, especially for me, considering I do name-drop Assassin's Creed every chance I get. There's a few things about this series that I love, and yes, I love the mechanics. I love the combat has been getting increasingly better since Brotherhood. I love the world. It's always changing, it's always alive, it's always huge, and I love the plot. I do. I know a lot of people don't. It may not be for everybody, and it's kind of in the same way that I know a show like Lost is not really for everybody, but as the years go by, I feel like Assassin's Creed is starting to have more and more in common with a really great television show, and that when one game ends, it keeps you really excited to see what happens next. It's almost like each game in the series is a season of a TV show. So in that sense, I kind of am more supportive of the annual release schedule, even though ultimately I think it's going to end up being its downfall. But most importantly here, they showed us a lot of stuff at E3, and it all looked promising, and it all looked polished, looked better than Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed 2 before it. But I think the most important thing here is that I love the pirate theme of this game. Pirates are awesome, and so much of this world map is covered in water that I can't help but feel like this game kind of has to be different. The emphasis has to be different. So, considering we still really haven't gotten our hands on the single player, and we've only seen bits and pieces, we still have a bunch of unanswered questions, especially about, underwater traversal, things like that. There's still a lot of mystery to be had here, so I'm feeling very excited. I just can't get that feeling that a lot of people have that it's going to be another Assassin's Creed game, and somehow that's a bad thing. So, Assassin's Creed 4 looks awesome. I'm really hoping it delivers, and I'm really hoping it does so without all the crazy bugs that plague Assassin's Creed 3. Coming in at number 4 on my list is going to be Batman Arkham Origins. Another established franchise, I know, but I'm really excited to see what happens when a new studio comes in and takes over. Rocksteady is not working on this game. Instead, it's being worked on by Warner Bros. Montreal. But based on what we saw at E3, they seem to be playing it pretty safe and sticking pretty close to the Batman formula, which is not a bad thing. The atmosphere, the approach to storytelling, and the overall flow of the series has always been great, and they seem to be sticking to it. What I am really excited about, though, is the stronger emphasis on detective sequences. In the demo, they showed a sequence involving Batman trying to figure out how a helicopter was shot out of the sky. It looked like something you might see in Condemned 2 or even an episode of CSI, which was really cool. Mark Hamill is not returning to voice the Joker, which may piss off a lot of people, but I'm kind of excited. Troy Baker, the voice of Joel from The Last of Us, and Booker DeWitt from Bioshock Infinite has stepped into the shoes of the Joker, and I'm interested to see how different or how similar he is. Based on what we saw in the demo, the difference was pretty imperceptible, so I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. They've also taken a few liberties with the character designs for a few of the prominent villains, even villains we've seen in prior Arkham games. Bane looks notably different than he did in Arkham City. He looks more menacing, more frightening, and that kind of excites me. But perhaps the biggest deal here is the open world. It's apparently quite a bit larger than Arkham City. It's more open, and it's more vertical than before. And of course, the best part about Arkham City was playing as Batman, flying around open world Gotham. So if they can do that on an even grander scale, then I am super excited. Coming in at number 3 on my list is Contrast, a indie game being developed by Compulsion Games. It's coming out later this year on Steam, XBLA, PSN, PS4, and I believe Xbox One as well. So you play as Dawn, who's the young woman who happens to be the imaginary friend of a young girl named Dee Dee. So Dee Dee is leading you through this world. She's trying to figure out or solve this mystery revolving around her parents. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but it looks Looks pretty interesting. It's set in the 1930s and 40s, so it has a really interesting visual style, and the music is fantastic. But the central mechanic of the game involves being able to shift between the real world and the shadow world. So, in the demo we played, there was a big open area with a merry-go-round, and there was a light casting some really complex, moving shadows on the side of a building. So, you could walk up to the wall, press a button, and become a shadow on that wall, and then use the moving shadows to traverse and eventually gain access to hard-to-reach areas on the building, like balconies and so forth. So the game, may not be as grand in scope as something like GTA, but it has an appeal that definitely sticks with me longer. It gives me vibes of something like Limbo, Braid, PB Winterbottom, which are some of my favorite games of the generation, so needless to say, I'm super excited for this game. Number 2 on my list is Beyond Two Souls, the next game from David Cage and the team over at Quantic Dream, the studio responsible for Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain, 2 games that are both really well known for being super innovative, but at the same time having the tendency to lose focus or kind of fall apart near the end. The game spans 15 years in the life of a character who's played by Ellen Page. She is a character who is followed around or has this special connection with this invisible entity, ghost, I don't know what you want to call it, that follows her around throughout the game. So the game basically switches between moments that are, of Heavy Rain style gameplay, and then switches between to moments where you're playing as this invisible entity where you can possess people and have them do things for you, like kill an enemy or open a door or solve a puzzle, things like that. So it looks really exciting. The mystery of the story of the character with this invisible ghost thing is intriguing enough. But most importantly, I think it's important to note here that regardless of whether this game is good or it's bad, it's going to be a guaranteed discussion. It's going to be worthy of discussion. That is one thing Quantic Dream has always done, is they've created games that get people talking, and that in and of itself is a reason to be excited for this game. And my number 1 most anticipated game of the fall and winter 2013 would have to be the Bureau XCOM Declassified. Now, this is a game we saw a few years ago back at E3 2011, and at the time, the game looked quite a bit different than it does now. For one, it was a first-person shooter when we saw it, with a little more emphasis on shooting and the strategy elements maybe becoming secondary. However, the game went dark for a while and then resurfaced just recently with a new name and a new look. Obviously, the game is now more of a third-person shooter than a first-person shooter, but I think they brought the strategy elements that, were maybe made really popular with last year's XCOM Enemy Unknown and brought those to the foreground here, and put them in the context of something that plays more like a third-person shooter. In much the same way as XCOM Enemy Unknown, the game does appear to be cover-based, where you move from cover to cover, control squad mates, and obviously give commands to those squad mates using its really slick-looking, quote-unquote, weapon wheel interface. Of course, the elements that you would come to expect from an XCOM game are definitely still present here, being able to take alien technology on the battlefield and choose to use that on the fly, or send it back to your base to research and ultimately upgrade weapons, technology, squad mates, things like that, is definitely still present, and that all looks really solid. The one thing I'm super excited for is that I feel like this game may be presented in such a way that it may be more conducive to telling a story. I think XCOM Enemy Unknown was definitely, the emphasis was placed on strategy elements, so maybe the story took a little bit of a back seat. XCOM Enemy Unknown was a game that I really loved, but I think ultimately ended up being maybe a little overwhelming for someone like me who doesn't play a whole lot of strategy games. So seeing a game like this presented in a more maybe cinematic nature, placed in the context of something I'm more familiar with, like a third-person shooter, might make it a little bit more appealing to me. So the game comes out in mid-August 2013. Look for it. It's coming from 2K Marin, the studio behind Bioshock 2, so it definitely has some talented individuals working on the game. And, if you're a fan of strategy games, it looks great. If you're a fan of third-person shooters, it's definitely going to have something for you. But most of all, if you're just a person who really enjoyed playing XCOM Enemy Unknown, it's going to be something you're going to want to check out, because I think it looks really awesome. There you have it, folks. Those were my top 5 most anticipated games of fall and winter 2013. Of course, this list is by no means all-inclusive. There are a ton of games coming out that I failed to mention here that I'm still very excited for. Grand Theft Auto 5, of course we have new hardware coming out in the fall, so it's going to be an exciting couple of months. The next video this month is coming to you from Brad, so look for that. I'm sure his list is going to be quite a bit different than mine, and you also may notice at the end of each video we provided an outlet for other members of the staff to provide their top 5 list each month. If you're a subscriber to our Twitch page over at 4pp.tv, we really appreciate it. If you're not, we ask that you please consider it. It's $4.99 a month, and it gets you all the benefits listed here on the screen, including exclusive episodes of this Top 5 series. Be sure to check back next month for a new topic and new Top 5 lists from other members of the staff over at 4playernetwork.com. And as always, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next month.